What's up?
I'm so glad to have Bernie here on the EPS podcast, broadcasting live from Loaded Question Brewery in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and he is the first person up tonight. And you chose the Land Speeder from Star Wars, the original Star Wars, before it was called A New Hope, right? It was just Star Wars.
Just Star Wars.
Just Star Wars. And what brought your eye to that? Did you have one of these growing up?
No, I did not have one of these, and so I always wanted one of these. And so I'm thinking, yeah, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I know what that is.
So I don't know if you're like me, but when I was a kid growing up, I actually, we bought a lot of our Star Wars toys at thrift stores and garage sales. I remember going, even back then, they were pretty expensive at the store.
They were.
But the question that, so I was glad whenever I came across something like that somebody was, only a couple dollars. The question that Bernie chose to talk about tonight is, why did they make it? And it seems like a straightforward question to today's standards, because if you go up and down the toy aisles, every time there's a movie, even before it comes out, or a TV show or anything like that, they already have all the toys stocked up. In fact, a lot of modern day Star Wars fans know they can guess some of the plot twists from the toys that come out a month before the movie does.
Right.
But things were different back in 1977, weren't they?
They were a lot different. And so we're talking about just why was it made?
Yeah.
And so I would say why it was made was because you wanted to get little kids involved. It was so new.
Yeah.
And there was nothing like it. 2001: A Space Odyssey came out, and there was a few other things, but there was nothing quite like Star Wars. And I can remember seeing it as a kid, right, and standing in line and everything, and just it just captured my imagination. So I believe why they made it was, okay, we've got these little kids, right, or they got their parents or whatever. It was a phenomenon. And so now it's, I want to do this. I want to be Luke Skywalker. I want to be Han Solo or something like that. And I would say that a lot of kids like myself that grew up in the mid-70s, this is key to some of the things that they would go on to do later on in life. And so it just would catapult them.
I was going to say, have you seen some of the newer Disney Star Wars movies, like The Force Awakens and everything? I gotta say, some of it almost looks like, because I know J.J. Abrams is of that generation. He saw the movies as a kid, and a lot of the way that those movies pan out almost looks like they're playing with the toys, and like I remember reading about when they were making The Force Awakens, how they had, by that point, computer graphics, and he was like, let's put another TIE fighter up there, let's put another just being able to kind of living out the child fantasy of being able to just make your own story as you go along with Star Wars. And that's what this toy is all about, right?
Exactly. So I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah. There it is.
Okay, so with this, it's, this captures the imagination and everything. Can you hear me okay?
Actually, I don't know what happened to the audio. If you could just... Yeah, it seems to be working.
Okay, let's give it a shot. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
better. That's better. So, but I don't see very many toys like this being made in today's world. I think, and that might be some pop culture right there, where at this time kids were playing outside, or you didn't have the electronics or things like that. You didn't have computer games,
Right.
so you had. You had to do things manually and use your imagination, whereas now you can put on Oculus goggles and it puts you in the
Everything's
seat
done for you.
of one of these.
Right.
So I think toy making to some degree has gone away.
Right.
Where it's been replaced by the video games.
And almost every toy comes with some kind of internet relationship. You buy a plastic toy, and I have a 7.5-year-old son, so he, I go down the toy aisles with him and stuff, and I noticed that even though the packaging has gone back in time to try to get parents catch our eye from when we were kids, like, oh yeah, I remember He-Man, I remember Star Wars.
Oh, exactly.
The actual toy itself is not what it used to be. I mean, I don't know why they even have the hood could open up. It's totally missing now, but you can see inside the engine. And it's like, I was thinking about that on the way here. I'm like, there's no way that anybody was, it didn't actually work. It wasn't a real land speeder, so I don't know why they needed to have that. But I think that matches up with the kinds of play that kids did in the 70s.
I think
they want to see how things work, they take things apart, put it back together.
Exactly, I agree with that, because if you look at stores, there used to be rows and rows of model airplanes, model rockets, model cars, things like that, and you could put a engine together. Right, you learn the parts of an engine by putting it together with a model, and so you're absolutely right. If I can open the hood on this, I see how it works. Right. And so some of those kids that wanted to see how it works are now engineers. But today, who cares?
Right. And
I just called AAA.
It was a much more, and that's a great point. And if my speeder broke down too, I'd be like, But I mean, it's like the very disposable nature of our culture now, where if it doesn't work, just chuck it.
Oh, right.
It didn't exist back then.
No.
If your toy broke, you're gonna fix it, right?
Exactly.
And a lot of them didn't break very easily because they're made much more durable.
No, I mean, because look at it. This Star Wars came out in 1977, so that's over 40 years ago.
Right.
This is a 40-year-old toy made of plastic.
And it still
exists. It's almost nuclear hard.
Right. And another thing to consider, Star Wars blindsided everybody. They did not expect the response that they got, especially from the younger audiences. Because in the 70s, movies for the most part were made for adults. Little kids, but not adult movies, but it's like the kids had TV, the adults had the movies. And so by bringing this story, like Star Wars, out of, because it's based in so many tales from, the Wizard of Oz to fables and, old lore and religion is steeped in that. They bring it back in the 70s and it touches kids. That sounds bad. I'll edit that out. It really inspires kids. It reaches them. And so they weren't, in that era, they didn't make toys in tandem with movies like they did later on. I mean, I remember toys coming out from movies that didn't really deserve a toy,
exactly.
But with Star Wars, we gotta make toys, and they had no toys for the following Christmas. Kenner had to send out certificates saying, IOU basically, that, for the holiday season, bring this in the springtime in May of the following year or whatever.
And Kenner was so popular. Kenner, Mattel, all those toy makers, Milton Bradley. But then Kenner went away by the early 80s. By 82, 83, Kenner was long gone. They weren't making toys anymore.
I think they may have put too much into Star Wars because once they made the last, of the trilogy, I remember throughout the 80s they'd come up with a few other toys that had nothing to do with the movies. They were inspired by the movies, but they weren't actually from the movie.
Right.
So we were kind of like, well, we can't act out something we don't know. So I remember having this weird toy. It was supposed to be like an indoor speeder thing, and I'm like, they didn't actually have it. It was like this green thing that spun around. I'm like, I don't remember that from the movie, so it's hard for me to, connect it. And then when they came out with the re-releases in the 90s, it was a different company altogether. I think it was Hasbro that took it over.
Hasbro did take it over because they were doing everything with G.I. Joe.
Right, and that's the change of G.I. Joe's size was inspired by that toy you're holding in your hand because they used to be huge.
G.I. Joes were like 6-7 feet, and then when they were made smaller with this, it's like, okay, that's the way we're going to go.
Right, and so we have to match up. So, it's just that easy to talk about artifacts from the past that you would normally overlook.
Right.
And look at that, we got a 10-minute long conversation out of it.
How about that?
And I thank you so much for joining me on the EPS Podcast Live.